TIFU, by agreeing to babysit my girlfriend's nephew and discovering he isn't actually related to her. The kid was crying in my living room when I found the birth certificate, and that's when I knew Allison had been lying to me for 8 months straight. Not small lies, not white lies, the kind of lies that make you question whether you ever knew someone at all. The birth certificate was tucked inside a folder she'd left on my kitchen counter, and the name listed under Mother wasn't her sister Rebecca like she'd told me 100 times. It was someone named Jennifer Holbrook, and under Father, it said Nathan Holbrook. The child's name was listed as Ethan Holbrook, born 3 years ago in Portland. But Allison had always told me her sister lived in Seattle, that Rebecca was a nurse who worked night shifts and needed help with childcare. I stood there holding this document, listening to Ethan sob in the next room because I'd told him his aunt would be back soon, and my hand started shaking so badly I had to set the paper down. Everything felt wrong. The apartment felt wrong. The sounds from outside felt wrong. My own breathing felt wrong. I'd been dating Allison for almost 9 months when she first asked me to babysit Ethan. We'd met at a bookstore in January, one of those meet-cutes that felt too perfect to be real. She was reaching for the same mystery novel I wanted. We laughed about it, grabbed coffee next door, and spent 3 hours talking about everything from childhood pets to our dream jobs. She was a graphic designer, freelanced from home, had this infectious laugh that made everyone around her smile. She told me about her family that first day, her sister Rebecca, the single mom nurse who struggled to find reliable childcare, and her nephew Ethan, who she described as the sweetest kid you'd ever meet. I thought it was admirable how much she helped her sister out. Green flag, right? A woman who prioritizes family, who steps up when needed. I fell for her hard and fast, the way you do when someone seems to fit perfectly into all the empty spaces in your life. The first time I met Ethan was in March, about 2 months into our relationship. Allison brought him to my apartment for a quick visit before they headed to the park. He was quiet, almost unnaturally so for a 3-year-old, with dark curly hair and these huge brown eyes that seemed to take in everything. He didn't talk much, just nodded or shook his head when Allison asked him questions. She explained that he was shy around new people, that Rebecca had mentioned he was going through a clingy phase. It made sense to me. Kids go through phases. I remembered being shy as a kid myself. We played with some toy cars I'd bought specifically for the visit, and by the end of that hour, he'd warmed up enough to show me how he could make the cars do jumps off my coffee table. Allison watched us with this soft smile, and I remember thinking I could see a future here, not just with her, but with this ready-made family dynamic that felt comfortable and right. She started asking me to babysit in May. Just for a few hours here and there, usually on Saturday afternoons when Rebecca had to work a double shift and Allison had client deadlines. I didn't mind. Ethan and I had developed a rapport. We'd build block towers, read picture books, watch cartoons. He was still quiet, but he'd started talking to me more, asking questions about the toys or the snacks I'd give him. Allison always picked him up right on time, always came with a coffee for me and profuse thanks. She'd tell me stories about Rebecca's appreciation, how her sister was so grateful to have reliable help. Once she even showed me a text, supposedly from Rebecca. "Tell your boyfriend he's a lifesaver. Ethan won't stop talking about the castle you guys built." I felt good about it. Useful. Like I was contributing something meaningful to this family I was slowly becoming part of. Red flags? There were some, looking back now with the clarity that comes from having your entire reality shattered. Rebecca never actually called to thank me herself. I never met her, not once in all those months. Allison always had an explanation. Rebecca was exhausted from her shifts. Rebecca was dealing with Ethan's father drama. Rebecca was intensely private about her personal life. I accepted these explanations because I trusted Allison, because the alternative was to suspect someone I loved of lying, and who wants to be that paranoid person who questions everything? The night everything fell apart was a Saturday in September. Allison had called me that afternoon, sounding frazzled and desperate. Rebecca had a family emergency, something about their mother being rushed to the hospital in Sacramento, and she needed to drive down immediately, but couldn't take Ethan because it would be too traumatic for him to see his grandmother in that condition. Could I possibly watch him overnight? Maybe even through Sunday morning? She'd drive back as soon as she could, but it might be late. I said yes immediately. Of course I said yes. This was an emergency. This was family, and I cared about Allison enough that helping her meant helping her whole family ecosystem. She dropped Ethan off around 6 in the evening, and he seemed more anxious than usual, clutching this stuffed rabbit he'd never brought before. Allison was distracted, kept checking her phone, barely kissed me goodbye before rushing out. I remember standing in my doorway watching her car disappear down the street, feeling this weird pit in my stomach that I couldn't explain. Intuition, maybe, or just the normal anxiety that comes with suddenly being responsible for a small child overnight for the first time. Ethan was restless that evening. He didn't want to eat the chicken nuggets I'd made, only picked at them before asking for his mommy. Not his aunt. His mommy. I froze for a second, then gently corrected him. "You mean Aunt Allison?" He looked confused, then nodded slowly, but something about the interaction felt off. Kids mix up words, I told myself. They call teachers mom, by accident. They get confused about familial relationships. It didn't mean anything. We played games until bedtime, and I set him up on my couch with blankets and pillows, turned on a nightlight I'd bought weeks ago in preparation for exactly this kind of situation. He fell asleep clutching that rabbit, and I sat in my armchair watching him, feeling this overwhelming sense of protectiveness mixed with something else I couldn't name. Dread, maybe, or premonition. The apartment was too quiet. The streetlight outside cast weird shadows. I kept checking my phone for updates from Allison, but there was nothing. No texts about her mother's condition, no estimated return time. Just silence. Around midnight, I couldn't sleep. I was lying in my bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to make sure Ethan was still breathing in the next room, when I heard my phone buzz. Finally, I thought, an update. But it wasn't from Allison. It was from my buddy Kyle, sending me a screenshot of a Facebook post. "Dude, isn't this your girlfriend?" The post was from someone named Jennifer Holbrook, and it was a desperate plea that had been shared thousands of times. Missing. Ethan Holbrook, 3 years old, last seen at Riverside Park in Portland on Saturday afternoon. Wearing blue shirt and khaki shorts. If you have any information, please contact Portland Police immediately. There was a photo attached. It was Ethan. Same dark curly hair, same brown eyes, same stuffed rabbit he was currently sleeping with on my couch. My heart stopped. Actually stopped. I sat up so fast I got dizzy, read the post again, convinced I was misreading something. But no. This woman Jennifer was looking for Ethan, calling him her son, saying he'd been missing for hours, and he was asleep in my living room. I stumbled out of bed, almost tripped over my own feet getting to the living room. Ethan was still sleeping peacefully, his little chest rising and falling with each breath, completely unaware that his face was plastered all over social media as a missing child. My brain tried to make it make sense. Maybe it was a different kid. Maybe Jennifer Holbrook was a crazy ex-relative trying to claim custody. Maybe Allison's sister Rebecca had a different last name, and this was all some misunderstanding. I pulled up the Facebook post on my phone, zoomed in on the photo. It was taken at a playground, Ethan sitting on a swing, mid-laugh. He was wearing the exact same blue shirt he'd been wearing when Allison dropped him off. The same one currently folded on my coffee table because I'd changed him into pajamas for bed. My hands started shaking again. I tried calling Allison, straight to voicemail, tried texting, "Call me now, emergency." Nothing. The read receipts didn't even show up, meaning she'd either turned off her phone or blocked me. I went to Jennifer Holbrook's Facebook profile. It was public, probably deliberately so to help spread the word about her missing son. Her feed was full of photos of Ethan. Ethan at birthday parties, Ethan at the beach, Ethan with a man who must be Nathan, the father listed on that birth certificate I hadn't found yet. They looked like a normal family, a happy family. And underneath the missing child post, hundreds of comments. "Praying for you," "Shared in Portland," "Did you file a police report?" Jennifer had responded to that one. "Yes, immediately. Detective Rachel Montgomery is handling the case. Amber Alert should be issued soon." I felt sick, physically sick. Ran to the bathroom and dry heaved over the toilet. This couldn't be happening. Allison couldn't have kidnapped a child. The woman I loved, who brought me coffee and laughed at my terrible jokes and talked about maybe moving in together someday, couldn't be a child abductor. There had to be an explanation. There had to be. But I couldn't reach her. I tried calling 5 more times. Nothing. I went to my kitchen to get water, trying to calm my racing thoughts, and that's when I saw the folder on the counter. Allison must have left it there when she'd dropped off Ethan, too frazzled to remember to take it with her. It was one of those manila folders, slightly worn at the edges. My hands were still shaking as I opened it. The birth certificate was on top. Ethan Holbrook, born to Jennifer Marie Holbrook and Nathan James Holbrook. No mention of any Rebecca. No mention of Allison. Underneath were other documents. Immunization records with Jennifer's signature, a social security card, printouts from a pediatrician's office addressed to Jennifer at a Portland address, and then, tucked at the very bottom, a newspaper clipping from 3 months ago. Local mother loses custody battle, vows to appeal. It was about Jennifer Holbrook, but the article was clearly biased, written to make her sound unstable. It mentioned a contentious divorce, allegations of parental alienation, Nathan Holbrook getting primary custody. Jennifer had been granted supervised visitation only. The clipping had notes in the margins in Allison's handwriting. Vulnerable, desperate, Saturday park schedule. My brain finally connected the dots. Allison had been planning this. She'd researched Jennifer, figured out her visitation schedule, found out when Ethan would be at the park with his mother. And then she'd taken him. Not impulsively, not in a moment of madness. This was premeditated. The folder proved it. All those months of telling me about her nephew, about her sister Rebecca, it had all been an elaborate lie to establish a cover story. To make sure that if anyone saw her with Ethan, if I posted a photo on social media or mentioned babysitting to a friend, there would be a plausible explanation. She'd used me as part of her alibi, as another layer of legitimacy. I thought about all those Saturdays, all those hours I'd spent playing with a kidnapped child, while his real mother was probably losing her mind with worry. The guilt hit me like a physical blow. I'd been an accomplice. Unknowingly, but still. I'd helped Allison hide this child. I needed to call the police. I knew that intellectually. But emotionally, I was paralyzed. What if I was wrong? What if there was still some explanation I wasn't seeing? What if calling the cops would somehow make things worse, put Ethan in danger, destroy Allison's life over a misunderstanding. I sat on my kitchen floor with the folder in my lap, phone in my hand, literally frozen with indecision. And then Ethan started crying. Not the normal crying of a kid having a nightmare. The desperate, scared crying of a child who wants his mother and doesn't understand why she's not there. I went to him, picked him up, held him while he sobbed into my shoulder. "I want my mommy," he kept saying. "Where's my mommy?" And I knew, holding this terrified 3-year-old, that there was no choice to make. None of this was about me or Allison or our relationship. It was about getting Ethan back to his real mother. I called 911 at 1:15 in the morning. The operator answered on the second ring, and I remember how steady I tried to make my voice sound even though I was crying. "I have a missing child at my apartment. Ethan Holbrook. He was reported missing earlier today from Portland. He's safe, he's here with me, but I need someone to come get him." There was a pause on the other end, then a flurry of questions. How did I have him? Where was I located? Was anyone else in the apartment? Was the child injured? I answered everything as clearly as I could, gave my address, explained that my girlfriend had dropped him off claiming he was her nephew, but I'd just discovered he was actually a kidnapped child. The operator told me to stay on the line, that officers were being dispatched immediately, that Detective Montgomery was being contacted. I sat on the couch with Ethan still clinging to me, phone on speaker, waiting for the sound of sirens that would change everything. The police arrived within 8 minutes. 3 squad cars, lights flashing but no sirens, so as not to wake the entire neighborhood. I'd managed to calm Ethan down enough that he'd fallen back asleep against my chest, and I was terrified to move him, terrified that any sudden motion would make him start crying again. 2 officers came to my door first. Officer Daniels, mid-30s with kind eyes, and Officer Reeves, younger, hand near his weapon like he wasn't sure what situation he was walking into. I must have looked insane, standing there at 1:30 in the morning with a sleeping child in my arms and tears streaming down my face. I invited them in, spoke in whispers, showed them the folder on the kitchen counter. Daniels took photos of everything with his phone while Reeves called someone, presumably to confirm Ethan's identity and status. Within minutes, my apartment was full of people, paramedics to check Ethan over. A woman from Child Protective Services named David Carpenter, who introduced himself in the gentlest voice I'd ever heard and explained he needed to document the child's condition. And finally, Detective Rachel Montgomery, who arrived looking like she'd been woken from a dead sleep, but somehow still radiated this aura of complete competence. Detective Montgomery was maybe 50, gray hair pulled back in a bun, wearing jeans and a police department windbreaker. She had this weathered face that suggested she'd seen every terrible thing humans could do to each other, and had somehow maintained her faith in humanity anyway. She sat down across from me at my kitchen table while the others worked around us, and she pulled out a small recording device. "I need to record this conversation. Is that all right?" I nodded. She stated her name, the date, the time, my name, and address. Then she looked at me with these sharp blue eyes and said, "Tell me everything from the beginning. How do you know Allison, and how did you end up with Ethan tonight?" So I told her. All of it. Meeting Allison in January, being introduced to her nephew in March, all the babysitting sessions since May, the emergency call tonight about Rebecca's mother being hospitalized. Montgomery listened without interrupting, taking notes in a small spiral notebook, her expression carefully neutral. When I finished, she asked, "Did you know Ethan was a kidnapping victim?" "No," I said, and my voice broke. "I swear to God, I had no idea until an hour ago. I thought he was her nephew. I thought I was helping." She studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. "I believe you. Your phone records and social media will confirm the timeline, but preliminarily, it appears you're a victim here too. She used you as an unwitting accomplice." The word victim felt strange. I'd been in a relationship with someone for 9 months. How could I be a victim? But Montgomery explained it clinically, like she'd seen this pattern before. Kidnappers often create elaborate cover stories and recruit unknowing participants to lend legitimacy. The fact that she introduced Ethan to you early, had you babysit multiple times, even showed you fake texts from a fictional sister, all of that was designed to make her possession of this child seem normal and justified. If anyone asked questions, she had you as a reference. "My boyfriend watches him all the time. You were her insurance policy." The words made sense, but they also made me want to throw up again. I'd been so thoroughly manipulated, so completely fooled. What did that say about me? About my judgment? About my ability to see the person I claimed to love for who she really was? They woke Ethan up gently around 2 in the morning. David Carpenter from CPS did it, kneeling by the couch and speaking in that same soft voice. "Ethan, sweetie, there are some people here who want to take you to see your mommy." Ethan's eyes opened, confused and scared, scanning all the strangers in the apartment. He reached for me, and I took his hand, trying to smile reassuringly, even though I was crying again. Carpenter explained they needed to take him to the police station where his parents were waiting. Ethan asked where Aunt Allison was. I didn't know what to say. How do you explain to a 3-year-old that the person who took him wasn't actually his aunt? That she'd lied about everything? Carpenter handled it better than I could have. "Your mommy and daddy are waiting for you. Would you like to see them? Ethan nodded hesitantly. They wrapped him in a blanket, and Carpenter carried him out to a car. I watched from my doorway as they drove away, this little kid I'd grown attached to over months of babysitting, and I knew I'd probably never see him again. That felt right, but it also felt like losing something. Detective Montgomery stayed after everyone else left. It was almost 3 a.m, and my apartment looked like a crime scene because technically it was. They'd taken the folder, photographed everything, bagged Ethan's clothes as evidence. Montgomery made me coffee, which felt surreal, having a detective make coffee in my kitchen while I sat at my own table feeling numb. She sat back down with 2 mugs and said, "We need to find Allison. Do you have any idea where she might go?" I thought about it. She'd told me about an apartment in the city, but now I wondered if that was even real. Did she have family? I'd never met any of them. Friends? She'd introduced me to a couple of women she claimed were college buddies, but who knew if that was true? I don't know, I admitted. I don't think I know anything real about her. Montgomery nodded like she'd expected that answer. We'll check her apartment, her known associates, her financial records. She can't hide forever, not with an active warrant for her arrest. She paused, then added more gently, "You should prepare yourself for what comes next. This is going to be a media story. Missing child recovered, kidnapper still at large. Your name will probably come up as the person who called it in. You'll likely have reporters trying to contact you." I couldn't process that yet. I was still stuck on the fundamental betrayal. Why would she do this? I asked. Why would anyone kidnap a child they have no connection to? Montgomery leaned back in her chair, considering. That's what we need to find out. There are different types of child abduction. Sometimes it's revenge against a specific parent. Sometimes it's someone who wants a child and can't have one. Sometimes it's delusional. The kidnapper genuinely believes they're saving the child from harm. Based on that newspaper clipping in her folder, she'd researched Jennifer's custody situation. Maybe she sympathized with her, thought the court decision was wrong, decided to rescue Ethan, or maybe it's something else entirely. We won't know until we find her and ask. She finished her coffee and stood up. Get some sleep if you can. I'll need you to come to the station later today to give a formal statement. We'll need to go through your phone, your social media, any communication you had with Allison. And be prepared for this to be a long process. Recovery is just the first step. The investigation will take time. She left around 3:30, and I was alone in my apartment for the first time since finding that Facebook post. I sat on my couch where Ethan had been sleeping just hours ago, and I finally let myself fall apart completely. Not crying, exactly. More like this full-body shaking where I couldn't catch my breath, and my mind kept replaying every moment with Allison, looking for signs I'd missed. How had I not known? How had I not sensed something was wrong? I thought about all the times she'd deflected questions about her family, how she'd never invited me to family gatherings, how I'd never met this supposedly grateful sister. I told myself it was normal to maintain some boundaries, normal not to rush into family introductions. But it wasn't boundaries. It was lies. Layer upon layer of carefully constructed lies, and I'd bought every single one. I must have finally fallen asleep around dawn because I woke up to my phone ringing at 9. It was Detective Montgomery. Jennifer and Nathan just left the station with Ethan. I thought you'd want to know he's back with his parents. He's safe. Safe. The word should have made me feel better, but instead, it just highlighted how unsafe he'd been while in my care without me knowing it. I thanked Montgomery and hung up, then made the mistake of checking my phone. 17 missed calls, 30+ texts. My Facebook was blowing up with messages from people I hadn't talked to in years. The story had already hit the news. Child recovered after abduction from Portland Park, read one headline. Kidnapped toddler found safe after anonymous tip, read another. Anonymous. At least they hadn't released my name yet. But in the Portland Reddit community and various Facebook groups, people were already speculating. Someone had recognized my car in one of the photos from when police were at my apartment. Isn't that apartment complex on 5th Street? My friend lives there, saw all the cop cars last night. It was only a matter of time before someone connected the dots and posted my name. I turned my phone off. I couldn't deal with it. Couldn't deal with explaining to people that I'd unknowingly harbored a kidnapped child, that my girlfriend was a wanted fugitive, that my entire life for the past 9 months had been a fiction. I went to the police station at 2 that afternoon. Detective Montgomery had called my phone so many times that I'd finally turned it back on, and she'd been kind, but firm. I needed to come in. I needed to give my statement while everything was fresh, and I needed to bring any physical items Allison had left at my apartment. I gathered everything I could think of. A toothbrush she kept in my bathroom, a sweater she'd left on my couch, some books she'd loaned me. All of it went into a garbage bag that I carried into the station like I was taking out trash, which felt appropriate somehow. The station was chaos. Reporters camped outside, camera crews from local news stations, people holding "Welcome Home Ethan" signs like he was going to walk out the front door. I kept my head down, pushed through the crowd, gave my name to the desk sergeant who'd clearly been expecting me. He led me to a conference room where Montgomery was waiting with another detective I didn't know, and a woman who introduced herself as Lisa Hartwell, a forensic psychologist who specialized in cases involving child abduction. Dr. Hartwell was maybe 40, with dark hair and glasses, dressed in professional attire that made me acutely aware I was wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt I'd slept in. She shook my hand and explained she was there to help assess my statement and provide insight into Allison's possible motivations. We sat around the conference table, and they recorded everything again while I went through the story in even more detail than I had the night before. They wanted to know about every interaction with Allison, every time she'd mentioned her fictional sister, every babysitting session with Ethan. Montgomery took notes while the other detective, a guy named Stevens, pulled up social media on a laptop and confirmed everything I was saying. Every photo I mentioned, every check-in at a restaurant, it was all there, documented on Facebook and Instagram. Evidence of a relationship that had never been real. Evidence of my monumental stupidity. Doctor. Hartwell asked the hardest questions. Did you ever notice Allison displaying any obsessive behavior? Talking excessively about children, about motherhood, about custody situations? I thought back. She did mention once that she thought the family court system was broken, that mothers often got screwed in custody battles even when they were the better parent. But it was just a conversation, you know? I thought she was being sympathetic to her sister's situation. Hartwell made a note. Did she ever express interest in having children herself? Did you discuss future plans involving kids? We had, actually. She'd told me she wanted kids someday but wasn't ready yet. Said she wanted to establish her career first, get married, do things the right way. Another lie, probably. Or maybe not. Maybe she did want kids and couldn't have them, and that had spiraled into this. I didn't know. I didn't know anything anymore. Did she ever seem to have unexplained absences? Times when she was unreachable or vague about her whereabouts? Montgomery asked. I thought about all the times she'd canceled plans last minute, claiming client emergencies or headaches. How many of those had actually been surveillance trips to Portland, watching Jennifer and Ethan planning the kidnapping? They showed me more evidence they'd collected. Allison's apartment had been searched that morning. She wasn't there, hadn't been there since Saturday, but they'd found a treasure trove of disturbing material. Printed photos of Ethan, taken with a telephoto lens from a distance. He was at playgrounds, at the grocery store, in his own front yard. Some were dated back to June, meaning she'd been stalking this family for months before she finally took him. There were handwritten notes about Jennifer's schedule. Riverside Park, every Saturday, 2 to 4 p.m. Coffee shop on Morrison Street Wednesdays. Daycare pickup 5:30 p.m. My stomach turned seeing Morrison Street written there, one of the forbidden names but just as a street name in Allison's surveillance notes. There was a burner phone with no calls made but dozens of photos of Ethan. And most damning, there was a journal. Pages and pages of Allison's handwriting, talking about how she was going to save Ethan from his terrible father, how Jennifer deserved to have her son, how the court system was corrupt, and she was going to make things right. Detective Stevens read passages aloud, and they were chilling. Nathan Holbrook doesn't deserve to be a father. I've watched him at the park, barely paying attention while Ethan plays, always on his phone. Jennifer is the one who loves him, who should have him. And later. I've been thinking about this for weeks. I could take him during Jennifer's Saturday visitation. She wouldn't even be a suspect because she'd be the one reporting him missing. And once enough time passes, once people stop looking, I could help her disappear with him. Start over somewhere. We could be friends. She'd be so grateful. Reading those words, hearing Allison's voice in my head saying them, I felt physically ill. She'd fantasized about being Jennifer's hero, about bonding with her over this stolen child. It was delusional and terrifying. Doctor. Hartwell confirmed it. This appears to be a case of pathological altruism combined with possible delusions of grandeur. She saw herself as a savior figure, righting wrongs she perceived in the custody system. The fact that she developed an elaborate cover story involving a fictional sister shows premeditation and significant planning capability. This wasn't an impulsive act. It was methodical. The interview lasted 3 hours. By the time they let me go, it was after 5, and my head was pounding from stress and lack of sleep. Montgomery walked me out through a back entrance to avoid the reporters. Before I left, she put a hand on my shoulder. I know this is incredibly difficult. You've been through a trauma, even if you didn't realize it at the time. I'd recommend talking to someone, a therapist who specializes in this kind of manipulation and betrayal. She handed me a card for a counseling service. And stay safe. Allison is still out there. She might try to contact you. If she does, don't engage. Call me immediately. The thought hadn't occurred to me that Allison might be dangerous to me specifically, but Montgomery's concern made it real. Of course, Allison might reach out. I was her boyfriend, supposedly the person she trusted most. She might think she could convince me to help her hide, or at least not to cooperate with police. I took the card and promised to be careful. At home, I finally let myself read the news coverage. The stories were everywhere now. National outlets had picked it up. Kidnapped boy reunited with parents after multi-state search. They had photos of Jennifer and Nathan leaving the police station with Ethan, the little boy wrapped in his father's arms. Jennifer was crying. Nathan looked grim and protective. There were interviews with neighbors, with Jennifer's friends, with Child Protective Services praising the quick recovery, and buried in several articles, mentions of an individual who had been unknowingly babysitting the child coming forward with crucial information. That was me. The individual. My phone started buzzing again with messages from reporters who'd somehow gotten my number. Would you be willing to share your story? How did you discover Ethan was kidnapped? What was your relationship with the suspect? I blocked them all. I didn't want to share my story. I didn't want my face attached to this nightmare. I just wanted to disappear. But the internet doesn't let you disappear. By Sunday evening, someone had leaked my name. It started in a Portland Facebook group, then spread to Reddit, then Twitter. People were doxing me, posting my address, my workplace, my social media profiles. Most comments were sympathetic. He's a victim too. Can't imagine finding out your girlfriend is a kidnapper. At least he did the right thing and called police. But there were others, uglier ones. How did he not know? What kind of idiot dates someone for 9 months and doesn't meet their family? He must have suspected something. Those comments hurt worse than they should have because part of me agreed with them. How had I not known? What warning signs had I ignored because I was too in love, too trusting, too stupid to see what was right in front of me? I deleted all my social media apps, logged out of everything. If I couldn't see the comments, maybe they'd hurt less. On Monday morning, I called in sick to work. My boss had already seen the news, had already connected my name to the story. He was kind about it, told me to take all the time I needed, but I could hear the discomfort in his voice. Nobody wants their employee associated with a kidnapping case, even as a victim. I spent the day in my apartment with the curtains drawn, jumping at every sound, convinced reporters were camped outside even though I'd checked and the street was clear. Detective Montgomery called with an update. They'd tracked Allison's car to a hotel 3 hours north. She'd checked in Saturday night under a fake name, but had left before police arrived on Sunday. She'd abandoned the car at a bus station, and they were now checking security footage to see where she'd gone. She's running, Montgomery said, and she's smart enough to avoid using credit cards or her phone, but she'll slip up eventually. They always do. The call I wasn't expecting came on Wednesday afternoon. A number I didn't recognize, but I answered because it could have been police or someone official. Instead, it was a woman's voice I didn't know, shaky and hesitant. Are you the person who had my son? Who called the police? It was Jennifer Holbrook, Ethan's mother. I almost dropped the phone. Yes, I managed to say. I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I thought... She cut me off, not unkindly. I know. The detective told me. She told me you were lied to, that you didn't know. I needed to talk to you. To thank you. If you hadn't called when you did... Her voice broke, and I heard her crying on the other end of the line. I felt tears on my own face again. How many times had I cried in the past 4 days? I'd lost count. How is Ethan? I asked. Is he okay? She took a shaky breath. He's confused, asking about the nice man who gave him chicken nuggets and built block towers with him. The therapist says it's normal, that he'll process it in his own time. He's safe now. That's what matters. But I needed you to know. You saved my baby. You gave him back to me. I'll never be able to repay that. We talked for almost an hour. She told me about Saturday at the park, how she'd turned around for just a minute to grab Ethan's water bottle from her bag, and when she looked back, he was gone. How she'd screamed his name, searched frantically, called 911 within 5 minutes. How the police had interviewed everyone at the park, but nobody had seen anything useful. A woman with dark hair talking to a little boy, but she'd seemed friendly, seemed to know him, so nobody had intervened. That was Allison. She'd been watching, waiting for the perfect moment, and she'd taken Ethan so smoothly that witnesses barely registered it as concerning. Jennifer described the worst 36 hours of her life, not knowing where her son was, if he was hurt, if she'd ever see him again. She'd barely slept, couldn't eat, had volunteers searching all over Portland while police worked the case. And then the call at 2 a.m. We have your son. He's safe. Someone found him. I told her about Allison, about the lies, about all those months of thinking I was babysitting my girlfriend's nephew. Jennifer was quiet for a moment, then said something that surprised me. She must be very sick. To do something like this, to convince herself it was right. I almost feel sorry for her. I couldn't get there yet. Maybe someday I'd have that kind of grace, but right now I just felt angry and betrayed and stupid. We ended the call with Jennifer promising to keep me updated if I wanted, and me promising that if Allison tried to contact me, I'd tell police immediately. It felt surreal, this connection with a woman I'd never met before, bonded by trauma, and a 3-year-old boy who'd unknowingly tied our lives together. Allison was caught on Friday. 5 days after I'd called 911, 4 days after Jennifer and I had talked, the police finally found her. She'd made it to a small town near the Canadian border, was staying in a motel under another fake name. What gave her away was stupid bad luck. She'd gone into a convenience store, and the clerk was a true crime junkie who'd been following the case online. The clerk recognized her from the photos police had released and called 911. Local police surrounded the motel room, and Allison surrendered without incident. No dramatic standoff, no chase. She just opened the door with her hands up and let them arrest her. Detective Montgomery called me personally to tell me. It's over. We got her. She's being extradited back here for arraignment. I should have felt relief, But instead, I just felt empty. Getting Allison off the streets didn't undo the lies, didn't erase the past 9 months, didn't make me feel any less like an idiot. The arraignment was the following Thursday, 10 days after the night my world had imploded. I went because Montgomery said my presence might be helpful, that seeing the person she'd victimized might impact sentencing discussions. The courthouse was packed with media and spectators, but I was ushered into a separate area for witnesses and victims. Jennifer and Nathan were there too, sitting on a bench with matching expressions of exhausted relief. Jennifer saw me and immediately stood up, crossed the room, and pulled me into a hug. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for bringing my baby home." Nathan shook my hand, his grip firm, his eyes wet. "We owe you everything," he said. I didn't know how to respond to that. I hadn't been a hero. I'd been a dupe who'd finally done the right thing after months of unknowing complicity. Allison was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed in front of her. She looked smaller than I remembered, fragile and defeated. Her hair was unwashed, her face bare of the makeup she usually wore. When she saw me sitting in the gallery, our eyes met for just a second, and I saw something there. Not remorse exactly. Maybe regret that she'd been caught. Maybe sadness that I hadn't helped her escape. I looked away. I couldn't stand to see her face, to remember all the times I'd kissed her, held her, told her I loved her. All of it had been based on lies. The judge read the charges: kidnapping, custodial interference, child endangerment. Allison's public defender entered a plea of not guilty, and bail was set at $500,000. She'd be held pending trial. As they led her out of the courtroom, she turned and looked at me one more time, and I swear I saw her mouth the words, "I'm sorry." But sorry for what? For kidnapping Ethan? For lying to me? For getting caught? I'd never know, and I realized I didn't care. The trial took months to materialize, but I didn't attend most of it. Dr. Hartwell, the forensic psychologist I'd met that first day, had been right. I needed therapy. I started seeing a counselor twice a week, someone who specialized in trauma and manipulation. It was hard, excavating all the ways Allison had constructed her web of lies, identifying all the points where I should have questioned things but didn't. My therapist kept reminding me that skilled manipulators are experts at making their lies feel like truth, that I wasn't stupid or blind, just human. Some days I believed her. Other days I sat in my apartment, looking at the spot where Ethan had slept, and wondered if I'd ever trust my own judgment again. The news coverage eventually died down, moving on to the next tragedy, the next scandal. People stopped recognizing my name. I could go to the grocery store without being stared at. Life started to feel almost normal again, except it wasn't. How could it be? Allison ended up pleading guilty in exchange for a reduced sentence, 30 years with possibility of parole after 20. I read about it in the newspaper, didn't attend the sentencing hearing. According to the articles, she'd given a statement about her mental health struggles, about genuinely believing she was helping Jennifer, about losing touch with reality. The judge hadn't been sympathetic. "You terrorized a family," he'd said. "You stole a child from his mother and deceived everyone around you. Mental illness may explain your actions, but it doesn't excuse them." Jennifer had given a victim impact statement too, describing those 36 hours of not knowing if her son was alive, of imagining the worst, of having her world shattered. She'd asked for the maximum sentence. So had Nathan. The judge had split the difference. I saw Jennifer and Nathan occasionally after that. They'd insisted on taking me to dinner once everything settled, said they wanted Ethan to maintain positive associations with the time he'd been gone, even if he didn't fully understand what had happened. We met at a family restaurant, and Ethan remembered me, smiled shyly when I said hello. We didn't talk about Allison or the kidnapping. We talked about normal things: Ethan's preschool, a camping trip they were planning, my job. It was strange and sad and healing all at once. These people had been strangers to me before Allison's lies brought us together, and now they felt like distant relatives, connected by shared trauma. We still text sometimes, usually around holidays. Jennifer sends me photos of Ethan growing up, hitting milestones, being a normal kid. I think she wants me to see that he's okay, that the kidnapping didn't break him. Maybe she also wants me to know I'm okay too, that what Allison did to both of us didn't define our futures. It's been 2 years now since that September night when I found the Facebook post and my world stopped making sense. I've dated a few people since then, nothing serious. I'm more cautious now, maybe too cautious. I ask more questions, push for more verification, meet families earlier. My therapist says that's normal, but warns me against letting one bad experience make me cynical forever. Not everyone is Allison, she reminds me. Most people are exactly who they appear to be. I want to believe that. Some days I do. I've thought a lot about what Dr. Hartwell said that day at the police station, about pathological altruism and savior complexes, how Allison had convinced herself that kidnapping Ethan was an act of justice, of compassion, of making the world right, how she'd built an entire fictional reality to support that delusion and had brought me into it as an unwitting prop. I wonder sometimes if there were signs I missed in her treatment of me too, ways she'd manipulated or controlled that I'd interpreted as love. My therapist says it's natural to question everything in retrospect, but that I need to find a way to forgive myself for trusting someone who seemed trustworthy. I still drive past my old apartment sometimes, the one where all this happened. I moved out 6 months after Allison's arrest, couldn't stand to keep living in a place that felt haunted by lies. But occasionally, I'll take that route on my way somewhere else, and I'll look up at the window where I used to live, where a little boy once slept on my couch while his real parents lost their minds with worry. I think about how different my life could have been if Kyle hadn't sent me that Facebook post, if I'd remained ignorant for one more day, one more week. Allison might have tried to contact Jennifer, might have proposed her insane plan to help her flee with Ethan, or she might have just disappeared, taken Ethan somewhere far away, and I would have spent years believing my girlfriend had moved away with her sister and nephew, never knowing the truth. The thought makes me cold. The last time I heard from Jennifer was 3 weeks ago. She sent me a video of Ethan's 5th birthday party, a backyard celebration with a bouncy house and a dinosaur cake. He looked happy, surrounded by friends and family who loved him, completely unaware of how close he'd come to losing all of that. Jennifer's message said, "He's thriving, because of you." But I don't think about it that way anymore. Yes, I called the police. Yes, I did the right thing when it mattered. But I also spent months as part of Allison's elaborate deception, unknowingly helping her establish credibility, making her lies seem more real. I can't take credit for being a hero when I was also a victim and, however unwittingly, an accomplice. What I can take credit for is the moment when I had to choose between protecting someone I loved and protecting a child I barely knew, and I chose the child. That choice, that one correct choice in a sea of mistakes and manipulations, is the thing I hold on to when the guilt gets bad. I don't know what Allison thinks about now in prison. If she's gotten treatment for whatever mental illness drove her to believe that kidnapping could be justified. If she's capable of understanding the damage she did, not just to Jennifer and Nathan and Ethan, but to me too. I wrote her one letter, about a year ago, not because I wanted a relationship, but because my therapist thought it might help me find closure. I told her I hoped she was getting help. I told her I forgave her for lying to me, even though I didn't know if that was true. I told her I'd never understand why she thought taking a child was the answer to anything. She wrote back, a short note that basically said she knew she'd been sick, knew she'd hurt people, knew she deserved to be where she was. She didn't ask for my forgiveness or my understanding. She just said she was sorry, and that she hoped someday I'd be able to trust someone again. I never responded. I keep her letter in a drawer somewhere, a reminder of how thoroughly someone can hide who they really are, even from the people who think they know them best. The strangest legacy of this whole nightmare is that I can't watch missing children reports anymore without thinking of all the people peripherally involved who had no idea. The babysitter who thought they were helping a friend, the neighbor who thought they saw a happy family, the store clerk who sold toys to a kidnapper. We're all part of each other's stories in ways we never know, and sometimes those intersections are disasters waiting to be discovered. I was the person who made coffee for a woman planning to steal a child. I was the person who played cards with a kidnapping victim and thought it was a normal Saturday. I was the person who existed inside someone else's delusion until reality crashed in at 1 a.m. and changed everything forever. And now I'm the person who knows that sometimes the most important thing you can do is make one phone call, tell one truth, break one silence, even when it destroys the life you thought you were building. Especially then. I still think about Ethan sometimes. Wonder if he'll remember me when he's older, if his parents will tell him about the man who had him for 36 hours and called the police. I hope they do. Not because I want credit, but because I want him to know that sometimes people do the right thing, even when it's hard, even when it costs them everything. That's the lesson I'm still learning myself, 2 years later, still in therapy, still rebuilding the ability to trust. The world is full of people like Allison, skilled manipulators who can make you believe anything. But it's also full of people who choose truth over comfort, who choose to protect the vulnerable even at personal cost, who make the hard calls in the middle of the night when it would be easier to look away. I'm trying to be that second kind of person, every day, in every small choice. It's not redemption exactly, because I didn't do anything that needs redeeming. But it's something. A way forward. A life built on truth instead of lies. And some nights, when I can't sleep, when I'm haunted by all the ways this could have gone differently, that's enough to get me through until morning. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.